Couple disappeared after 1985. Wedding 12 years later. Satellite images reveal this. It had been 12 years since that fateful summer day when my daughter Melissa and her new husband Brandon vanished without a trace. For years, I lived in the agonizing unknown, wondering if they'd run away, if they were lost somewhere in the world, or worse, if something terrible had happened to them. But I never gave up hope. And just when I thought I could no longer endure the weight of unanswered questions, an unexpected phone call shattered my reality and opened a door I never imagined I'd walk through. What I would discover in the depths of the Everglades was more chilling than anything I had ever feared, and it would reveal a truth I wasn't prepared to face. The morning of June 12, 1985 is still so clear in my mind, like it happened yesterday. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and everything felt right with the world. My only daughter Melissa was getting married. The man she had chosen, Brandon Whitmore, was a nice young man, well-mannered, from a wealthy family. They were so in love, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This day was supposed to mark the beginning of a beautiful future for them both. We had the wedding at the small church near our home, nothing too extravagant, but enough to make it special. The reception was modest too, but I could see how happy Melissa was. She was glowing as any bride should. I watched her dance with Brandon, her laugh so full of joy. Little did I know that would be the last time I saw her smile like that. When they left for their honeymoon, everything seemed perfect. The Ford Thunderbird Brandon had gotten as a wedding gift from his father was the highlight of the day. It was bright yellow, shiny and new. But that car would become a symbol of everything lost. The next day the calls started. At first I thought it was just a mix-up, or maybe an accident. The first person who called was Brandon's mother, Eleanor. She said they hadn't heard from Melissa and Brandon since they left for the beach. I brushed it off, thinking it was just nerves, you know. They were newlyweds, maybe they wanted to be alone, I told myself. But as the days went by and no one could reach them, I started to feel the panic. The worry in my chest grew heavier with each passing hour. Why hadn't they called? Why hadn't they checked in? This wasn't like my daughter. She wouldn't just leave without a word. Not after everything we'd been through together. I waited and waited. No word, nothing. A few days later I went to the police. The officer told me not to worry too much. He said it was possible they had decided to go off somewhere and didn't want to be found. Young people do that, he said. They'll show up eventually. But Melissa wouldn't do that. Not to me. Not after all the sacrifices I had made to raise her on my own, with no help from anyone. I didn't have much, but I gave her everything. She knew what that meant. She wouldn't just disappear, not without telling me. So I held on to hope. I kept telling myself that they would come home soon. Months went by, and still no word, no sign. The police did what they could, but they couldn't find anything. They assumed they had run away together, maybe to escape family pressures. But that didn't sit right with me. Something was wrong. I knew it deep down in my gut. I even started to think maybe they had gotten into an accident. Maybe the car went off the road somewhere and they were trapped. But there was no evidence of that either. No car wreckage, no missing persons reports from anyone in the area. I felt hopeless. My heart was broken, but I still couldn't believe she would leave me like this. 12 years. 12 years of endless questions, sleepless nights, and growing desperation. The void that Melissa left behind was unbearable. Birthdays, Christmases, Mother's Days empty. No phone calls, no letters, not even a sign. My world became a place of silence. The loss was too much to bear, but somehow I kept going. One day at a time. I tried to accept it. I tried to move on, but deep inside, I couldn't. I couldn't let go of the truth that I knew was hidden from me. Then in 1997, everything changed. I was doing my usual grocery shopping in Walmart, trying to fill the empty spaces in my life. The mundane rhythm of my days had become a coping mechanism. The sun had barely risen that morning, and I was focused on picking out tomatoes when the shrill ring of my cell phone startled me. It was a new gadget that I'd won from a supermarket lottery the year before, and I hardly ever used it. But today I did. I looked at the screen, Detective Jason Pram. I hadn't heard from him in over a decade. I froze for a second before answering. "Hello," I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mrs. Carroll." The voice on the other end was urgent. "This is Detective Pram from the Homestead Police Department. We need you to come to Everglades National Park. Something related to your daughter Melissa and her husband Brandon has just surfaced." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. What did he mean, something surfaced? Had they found her? Was she still alive? My mind raced with 1,000 different scenarios. "What is it? What have you found?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We've recovered the yellow Ford Thunderbird from the Everglades. We need you to come to the park. We've also contacted the Whitmore family. Can you meet us at the park parking lot via Main Park Road? It's crucial that you come now." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't even know what to say. My mind was spinning, and for a moment I could hardly breathe. The car. After all this time, I finally managed to ask, my voice breaking. "Yes," he said. "We need you to help identify it. Please come quickly." Without even thinking, I abandoned my half-filled cart in the middle of the aisle. I heard the faint murmurs of other shoppers, but they felt distant, irrelevant. I grabbed my purse, almost dropping the oranges in the process, and rushed out of the store. I hardly noticed the drive. My mind was elsewhere, racing with thoughts of what this could mean. Could it be her? Could it be the sign I had waited for all these years? I pushed my old Honda Civic down Main Park Road, the familiar streets feeling like a blur as the memories came rushing back. The police had assumed that Melissa and Brandon had run off together, but I never believed that. Now, with the discovery of the car, I wondered if I was about to learn the truth I had been searching for all this time. As I neared the park, my heart pounded harder. The 20-minute drive felt both too long and not long enough. I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever I was about to see, but I knew I couldn't turn back now. I parked my car hastily, my legs trembling as I got out. The parking lot was filled with police vehicles and flashing lights, a chaotic scene of officials and park rangers directing traffic. My eyes immediately went to the flatbed trailer in the center of the lot. And there it was, the yellow Ford Thunderbird. Covered in algae and mud, the car had clearly been submerged for years, but even through the grime, I could see the shape of it. My heart stopped for a moment. It was unmistakable. The car that had once been so new, so full of life, now lay abandoned in the Everglades, just as my daughter had been abandoned all those years ago. But why? Why had it been hidden here? I stood frozen for a moment, unable to tear my eyes away from the sight of the yellow Thunderbird. My heart pounded in my chest, and a lump formed in my throat. I never thought I'd see that car again, much less in this way. After all these years, after all the searching and the waiting and the wondering, here it was. The car that had been part of the last moments of my daughter's life. As I walked closer, my mind began racing. How did it end up here? Why had no one found it sooner? Why had no one told me about it? I had so many questions, too many questions, and I could feel the panic rising in my chest. But I couldn't let myself fall apart now. Not now. Detective Pram approached me, his face grave. He looked younger than I remembered, perhaps, in his early 40s, but the weariness in his eyes told me he had seen too many unsolved cases, too many broken families. And now here we were again, with me standing in front of my daughter's car after 12 years of waiting. "Mrs. Carroll," he said, his voice soft but serious. "I know this is difficult, but we need to move quickly. We need you to confirm if this is indeed your daughter's car." I nodded, swallowing hard. I wanted to say something, but my throat was too tight, and no words would come out. I stepped forward, trying to steady my breathing. The car looked so different now, submerged in water for over a decade. The once vibrant yellow paint was now coated in algae, the windows opaque with sediment, yet it was unmistakable. I could still make out the shape of it, and I could still see the familiar license plate number. "That's it," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. "That's her car." Detective Pram nodded solemnly, taking a step back. "Thank you, Mrs. Carroll. We've contacted the Whitmore family, and they'll be here soon." The Whitmore family. The name sent a shiver down my spine. I had spent years trying to avoid them, trying to forget everything they had said about my daughter. Gregory Whitmore Brandon's father had been adamant that Melissa wasn't good enough for his son. He had made it clear he thought she was too poor, too unrefined. But Brandon had loved her. I knew that. He had chosen her. And no matter what his father thought, no matter how much he tried to tear them apart, it wouldn't change that. But now, standing here staring at the car that had carried them both into the unknown, I felt a wave of anger rise within me. What had happened to them? What had they endured in those final moments? I didn't have to wait long. Gregory Whitmore and his family arrived not long after. I could see him immediately, his stiff posture and expensive suit making him stand out among the crowd of officers and park rangers. He moved like he owned the place, with a sense of entitlement that made my blood boil. He didn't even look at me as he walked past, his eyes trained on the car, his expression unreadable. "Is that it?" Gregory asked, his voice cold and detached, as he glanced at Detective Pram. "Is that the Thunderbird?" "Yes, Mr. Whitmore," Detective Pram replied. "The car has been confirmed as belonging to your son and daughter-in-law." Gregory stepped closer, his face hardening as he examined the vehicle. "That's it then. That's the last piece of the puzzle. I suppose now you'll find something to pin on us, won't you?" I couldn't take it anymore. I had to speak. I had to say something. "Do you really believe my daughter would have run away with your son?" I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. "She loved him. She wasn't some naive girl who would just disappear. She didn't abandon me. She didn't leave us." Gregory turned to me with a sneer, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "My son was too good for her. You don't know the things she was involved in, the people she hung out with. That's the truth. And now we're stuck here with this mess." I could feel my hands trembling with anger. How dare he accuse my daughter of such things? How dare he paint her as something she was not? "Don't you dare," I said, stepping closer, my voice rising. "Don't you dare speak about her like that. She was a good person. She loved your son. And he loved her. That's the truth, not your lies." Before the argument could escalate further, Detective Pram stepped between us. His hands held up in a calming gesture. "That's enough, Mrs. Carroll. Please, let's keep things civil. I understand this is difficult for both of you, but we need to stay focused." I wanted to keep arguing, but I knew he was right. We weren't going to get answers by shouting at each other. So I took a step back, trying to regain control over my emotions. Detective Pram turned to the officer who had been standing behind Gregory. "What do we have from the vehicle?" he asked. The officer nodded and approached with an evidence bag. "We didn't find any remains, but we did recover this," he said, handing over a silver lighter. "It matches one that Mr. Whitmore had, according to the family." Gregory took the lighter without a word, but I could see the look on his face. He wasn't surprised. He didn't seem shocked by the discovery at all, as if he had expected it. "It's his," Gregory muttered, his voice flat. "We bought them together in Miami, Christmas 1984. It was a gift. I didn't care about the lighter. I didn't care about the damn thing. What I cared about was the fact that my daughter and Brandon had vanished. And now, 12 years later, I was standing here, looking at the car that had carried them to whatever fate they had suffered." Detective Pram was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "There's one more thing, Mrs. Carroll," he said, his tone changing. "We believe this may not just be a missing persons case. We're investigating it as a potential criminal case." My heart skipped a beat. "A criminal case," I repeated. "What do you mean we don't have all the answers yet?" Detective Pram said. "But whoever left this car here knew the area well. They knew how to access this remote location. Whoever did this wanted the car to disappear, and they took extreme measures to make sure it did." I felt a chill run down my spine. My instincts told me something wasn't right. My daughter and Brandon hadn't just disappeared. Someone had made them disappear. But who and why? I could feel the tension in the air, as Detective Pram walked us all toward the park's visitor center. My mind raced. I had never expected to find answers like this, never imagined that the yellow Thunderbird would resurface in the way it had, nor that the police would start speaking about criminal investigations. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet, and nothing was the same anymore. Gregory had been eerily silent ever since the lighter was retrieved, and I could tell he was struggling to keep his composure. I didn't look at him again. His presence in the crowd felt like a constant reminder of everything I had suffered because of him, his refusal to accept my daughter, his disapproving words, and his attempts to belittle her at every turn. My blood boiled at the thought. How could he be so callous about everything his son and my daughter were dead? And yet he seemed more concerned with appearances than finding out the truth. As we reached the visitor center parking lot, a few more officers had arrived, and the place had become even more chaotic than before. The red and blue lights flashed across the parking lot, illuminating the scene like a nightmare. I wanted to scream. This was supposed to be a peaceful place, a sanctuary for tourists and nature lovers. Yet here we were standing in the middle of an investigation that had shattered all my notions of justice. I could hear Detective Pram speaking to the officers, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying the moment I had seen the car again, the water-saturated yellow shell of what had once been so full of life. It brought back so many memories: their wedding, the dreams they had, the excitement of their new life together. It made me question everything I had been told. Was the accident that they spoke about years ago really an accident, or had there been something else at play? Had someone intentionally caused them harm? Had they been silenced, buried here, and left for dead? It wasn't until I saw a familiar face emerging from the crowd that I snapped back to reality. Eleanor Whitmore. Gregory's wife stood at the edge of the scene, her face pale and drawn. There was no anger in her expression, no haughty demeanor like her husband's, but something else: sorrow, resignation. She had lost a son, and now she had to face the truth about what had happened to him. I saw her eyes lock with mine, and she approached her movements slow and deliberate. I couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy for her despite everything. After all, she had lost just as much as I had. But how could she be so calm, so composed? Linda, Eleanor said quietly, her voice betraying the slightest tremor. I never wanted this to happen. I don't know what to say. Her words caught me off guard, and I couldn't stop myself from responding sharply. What do you mean you've been part of this too? You and Gregory always hiding the truth. Her expression faltered for a moment, as if something in my words had struck a chord. She swallowed hard before speaking again. You think I didn't try to stop him? You think I didn't know? Her voice dropped to a whisper. I tried. But you know how Gregory is. He wouldn't listen. And then Brandon disappeared. I didn't know what to believe anymore. But when I heard about this, about what happened to him, I felt like everything we did, everything we tried to hide it, doesn't matter anymore. I took a step back, stunned. Eleanor had been complicit, yes, but there was something in her tone that made me doubt her involvement. She had been trapped too, in a way, by the man she had married, by the power he wielded, and by the lies he fed her. I don't know how to feel about you, Eleanor. I said the words slipping out before I could stop them. You say you tried to stop him, but you stayed silent for all these years. Do you have any idea what that's done to me? Eleanor's face turned red, and I could see the tears welling in her eyes. I know, Linda. I know, she said, her voice breaking. But now, with everything coming out, I can't deny it anymore. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what my husband has done. Before I could respond, Detective Pram appeared again, his voice stern. Mrs. Carroll, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm afraid we'll need to separate you for a while. We need to conduct some more interviews, and we've got to get everything processed. I nodded, though my mind was far from here. I didn't want to be near Gregory or his family anymore. I didn't want to hear their excuses or their lies. I wanted answers, and the only way I was going to get them was if I kept moving forward. So I followed Detective Pram to the makeshift interview room, my legs still shaking from the tension of the last hour. He guided me to a chair, and I sat down, trying to calm my racing heart. "Mrs. Carroll, I'm going to ask you a few questions about what happened earlier," he said gently. "We need to make sure we have everything in order for the investigation." I nodded, steeling myself. I was ready for whatever came next. "What exactly did you hear when you were following Gregory and Otis in the Everglades?" Detective Pram asked, his tone professional. The words came rushing out. I followed them as they walked off the trail. I hid behind the rocks to listen. They were talking about the place where Melissa was buried. Otis said it was 6 feet down, just like Gregory had planned. And then Gregory told him that no one would ever find it unless they knew exactly where to look. Detective Pram scribbled furiously in his notebook, then looked up at me. "Did you hear anything else?" I paused, taking a deep breath. "Yes. Gregory offered Otis $300,000 to take the blame for both murders. He said that Otis would confess and say he killed Melissa and Brandon, but he wouldn't be punished because Gregory had connections. Otis could be rich while in prison, and Gregory would stay out of it. It was all about money, all about covering up the truth." Detective Pram's expression darkened. "That's serious, Mrs. Carroll. You've done the right thing by telling us. We'll take it from here." I nodded, feeling the weight of everything settle onto my shoulders. I had done what I could. I had followed them into the Everglades. I had heard the truth. Now it was up to the police to finish what I had started. But as I sat there waiting for the next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much darker. What had Gregory done to my daughter? What had he done to Brandon? And most importantly, what would the police find when they uncovered the rest of the truth? The tension was unbearable as I sat in that small, sterile room at the police station. Every minute felt like an eternity, and I couldn't stop thinking about the events that had unfolded just hours ago. I had seen Gregory's true colors, his arrogant dismissal of everything, his attempts to manipulate everyone, especially Otis. His lack of remorse, it was all becoming clear. Detective Pram hadn't spoken since I finished recounting everything I'd overheard in the Everglades. He just scribbled notes and let the silence hang thick in the air. I didn't mind. There was a part of me that felt like I needed the quiet, needed to gather my thoughts. My body still trembled from the rush of adrenaline that had surged through me when I'd first heard Otis talk about where he'd buried my daughter. But now I was left with a different kind of tension, the kind that comes with knowing that the truth is so close, yet still so far from being fully revealed. After what felt like an eternity, Detective Pram finally broke the silence. "Mrs. Carroll, I need you to stay here for a bit longer. We're going to continue with the investigation, and I'm going to need you to provide a formal statement about what you overheard. Everything you saw and heard regarding Gregory Whitmore and Otis Dunhall." I nodded. The formalities, the procedures, they were all part of this, and I had to follow through. It was the only way to make sure my daughter's memory wasn't tarnished, that the truth would be heard and honored. While I waited for the next steps, my mind kept drifting back to the image of the yellow Thunderbird being pulled from the water, its surface covered in mud and algae. That car had been an anchor in my daughter's life, and now it was a symbol of something much darker. Gregory's manipulations, the conspiracy to keep everything hidden, the lives he had destroyed to protect his reputation. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining Melissa's face, the way she would laugh, the way she'd roll her eyes when I told her to wear a sweater in the cold. I had missed her so much, and it felt like I was being torn apart all over again. But then there was the other thought. What about Brandon? He had loved my daughter. I had seen it when they were together, the way he would hold her hand and whisper in her ear. He was the kind of young man I would have hoped for her to marry, kind and thoughtful. But now everything I had believed about him seemed so distant, clouded by the dark reality of what had happened to him. I couldn't help but wonder. Was he really just another casualty of Gregory's need to control everything? Was he another pawn in his twisted game? I was snapped out of my thoughts when Detective Pram returned with a look of urgency in his eyes. "We've got something," he said, voice tight. "We just got confirmation from the forensics team. They found human remains in the Everglades, exactly where you pointed us. They're going to begin the process of recovery and identification." My heart skipped a beat, then sank. Melissa, Brandon. They were both here finally coming home. I fought to keep my composure, but the tears were welling up again, hot and fierce. "Detective," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What happens now?" He glanced at me, then quickly looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "Now we wait for the forensic team to do their work. It's going to take time, but we'll know for sure if the remains are Melissa's and Brandon's soon enough." I nodded, but the words didn't sink in. The waiting game was the hardest part. For 12 years, I had been waiting for some sort of closure, some sort of answer. And now, when it was finally within my grasp, all I could do was wait a little longer. Suddenly, I heard a commotion outside the interview room. A voice shouting, a door slamming open. It was Gregory. I knew it before I even saw him. His voice carried through the thin walls. "This is an outrage. You can't keep me here like this. I'm innocent." I clenched my fists, fury rising in me like a firestorm. He was still trying to play the victim, still trying to manipulate everyone around him. I couldn't let him get away with it. I couldn't let him turn this all around on me. Detective Pram opened the door just as Gregory stormed past. "Mr. Whitmore, please calm down," he said, his voice measured and controlled. But Gregory wasn't having it. "Calm down. You people are ruining my life. You're accusing me of things I didn't do. My son is dead, and now you want to add this to it." He turned to me as he stormed past, eyes full of hatred. "You've destroyed everything, Linda. This whole thing is your fault. You just can't let go of the past, can you?" I stood up, my hands shaking as I moved toward him. "You think you can keep lying, Gregory? You think you can keep manipulating everyone like this? You're going to pay for what you've done." His face turned red with anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about, Linda. You don't know anything." "Oh, I know enough," I spat back. "You've destroyed everything my daughter stood for, and now you're trying to get away with it. But it's over. Your lies won't protect you anymore. The truth is coming out." He stepped toward me, his hands clenched into fists. But before he could say anything else, Detective Pram stepped in between us. "That's enough," he commanded, his voice low but firm. "You both need to calm down." I stared at Gregory one last time, my anger flaring before I backed away. He was nothing but a coward, a man so desperate to cover up his mistakes that he was willing to ruin everyone else's life in the process. I wasn't going to let him do it any longer. This time, the truth would come out, and there was nothing Gregory Whitmore could do to stop it. The waiting room was suffocating. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the harsh white glow only making everything feel colder and more distant. My hands were trembling, and my mind raced back over the events of the past few hours. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had been leading up to this moment. The truth was finally coming to light, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a weight, something heavy I had to carry until the very end. I glanced at the clock. Time seemed to drag on. I couldn't stay still for much longer. My body was buzzing with nervous energy, my mind unwilling to rest. There was still so much to process, so much to figure out. What would the forensic team find? Would they confirm what we all feared? Was it really my daughter, buried in that desolate stretch of the Everglades, her life snuffed out at 24? The door to the waiting room opened, and Daniel and Eleanor walked in, their faces drawn, haunted. I saw the concern in their eyes, but they still didn't know the full extent of what had happened. I couldn't bring myself to tell them, not yet. Not while I still had so many unanswered questions. "Mom," Daniel said softly, sitting beside me. He was trying so hard to keep his composure, but I could see the pain behind his calm demeanor. "Is it over yet?" I shook my head. "No, not yet. We still have to wait for confirmation." Eleanor took the seat opposite me, her hands folded in her lap. She was a picture of quiet grief, her eyes looking distant. I could tell that she was already bracing herself for whatever the final revelation would bring. As much as I wanted to believe that she had been spared from this nightmare, I knew that now the truth had a way of dragging everyone into the darkness. "I can't believe it," Eleanor murmured, her voice breaking. "I still can't believe that Gregory could do something like this." I felt my heart twist, knowing she was just as blindsided as I was by the depths of Gregory's betrayal. For all these years she had trusted him. She had believed in his version of events, and now it was all falling apart piece by piece. I couldn't imagine the devastation she was feeling. She had loved Gregory too, even if it was in a different way, and now she was left to process the horror of what he had done to her son and to me. Before I could respond, a sharp knock on the door interrupted us, and Detective Pram stepped inside. His face was unreadable, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of what he had just uncovered. He motioned for us to stand. "We've got confirmation," he said, his voice steady, but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "The remains recovered from the Everglades match the descriptions of both your daughter and your son, Mrs. Carroll." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was real. It was confirmed. My daughter, my son. They were gone, and they hadn't just disappeared. They had been murdered, and it was all because of Gregory. The man who had seemed so charming, so perfect, was a monster, a murderer hiding behind a mask of power and control. I could hear Eleanor gasping beside me, but I couldn't turn to look at her. I couldn't process it. My mind was still reeling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. How had we gotten here? How had we allowed ourselves to believe that Gregory was innocent all this time? Detective Pram continued. "We're gathering all the evidence now. We've secured Gregory and Otis, and we're processing everything. The forensic team is starting to analyze the remains, and they'll begin looking for any further evidence that could connect Gregory to the crime." I felt my stomach twist. The truth was finally unfolding, but it wasn't the closure I had hoped for. There was no joy in this revelation. There was only pain. Pain that my daughter had been taken from me in such a brutal way. Pain that Brandon had been dragged into this mess all because of a father's greed. "But we still don't know everything," Detective Pram said, pulling me from my thoughts. "We've found enough to make the arrests, but there are still more questions to answer. Otis has started to talk. We'll need to speak with him in detail, but for now, it's clear that Gregory's role in all of this is undeniable." I nodded, a feeling of relief washing over me, but it was quickly replaced by a cold bitterness. Gregory wouldn't get away with it, not anymore. No matter how hard he fought or how much he tried to cover up his tracks, we had the truth now. It wasn't going to stay buried in the muck of the Everglades. It was going to come to light. Detective Daniel said, his voice quiet but firm. "What happens next? We're moving quickly," Detective Pram replied. "We'll be interviewing everyone involved. We'll dig into Gregory's connections, his business dealings, everything. He won't be able to hide from the truth any longer." I felt a rush of determination flow through me. This was the moment. After 12 long years of not knowing, of clinging to the hope that Melissa and Brandon were out there somewhere, it was time for justice. Time to make sure that Gregory would never hurt anyone else again. Time to make sure that my daughter and her husband got the peace they deserved. "You said Otis is talking," Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," Detective Pram said. "He's not fully cooperating yet, but we have enough to work with. He's admitted to his role in the plot, and we believe he's ready to provide more information." I felt the sting of the word plot. It made it all feel so much colder, so much more calculated. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a carefully orchestrated scheme, executed with cold precision. It was a betrayal that went beyond family. It was about power, about control, about tearing down everything good in someone else's life just to build your own empire. "Thank you, Detective," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We're ready to move forward." He nodded and turned to leave, but before the door could close behind him, he added, "We'll update you as soon as we have more information. Please stay close. We'll need your formal statements as soon as we process everything." I felt my hands shaking as I looked at Daniel and Eleanor. We had come this far, and we weren't going to stop now. The truth was finally out there, and Gregory's time was up. It was time for him to pay for what he had done. As the evening stretched on, the tension in the police station only grew. I could feel the weight of the past 12 years pressing down on me, but now it felt like a burden finally lifting. The truth was out there, Gregory's lies, his manipulation, his monstrous acts, they were no longer hidden. The door opened and Detective Pram stepped in again, his face grim but resolute. "We have a confession," he said, looking directly at me. "Otis has fully cooperated. He's provided the details we needed to connect Gregory to everything." I could hardly breathe. After all these years of waiting, the justice I had so long hoped for was finally within reach. Gregory's facade of respectability was crumbling, and now he would face the consequences of his cruelty. "The remains," Pram continued, "we've confirmed it. The DNA matches." A sob broke free from my chest. My daughter, my beautiful girl, had been found. Brandon had been found. And though the pain would never disappear, the knowledge that they hadn't been abandoned brought me a small measure of peace. "This is over," Pram said. "Gregory will be held accountable for what he's done. You've waited long enough." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. It was over. It